How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Buddy's House of Horror podcast, and welcome to my official review, first reactions to the heavily anticipated film, Terrifier 3. We're gonna cut all the bullshit and just get right to the show, but before we do that, you need to make sure that you are subscribing to the show wherever you listen to the show, leaving me a 5-star rating, leaving me a review, subscribing on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up. Wherever you listen to the podcast, make sure you are doing all of the things that you need to do to make sure this podcast survives and thrives. If you have any friends, family members who would be interested in the show, no matter where they're at, you need to make sure you are pointing this show in their direction. And without further ado, we're here to talk about Damien Leone's Terrifier 3. So ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get spooky. How is it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Buddy's House of Horror podcast, and welcome to my review of probably my most anticipated film of the year. If not my most anticipated, definitely in the top 3, and this is Terrifier 3. Very excited to be doing this episode for you guys. Very excited to talk about the film finally. Very excited that it is out. I'm having a lovely morning. It is a lovely autumn morning right now. I've got a warm cup of pumpkin spice coffee with me. I watched the film last night. I was originally going to record this, an initial reaction. I was even debating bringing my microphone and the computer to the cinemas with me and doing a podcast right then and there in the fucking parking lot. But I decided it was kind of best to just kind of let the film sit a little bit, collect my thoughts a little bit, and to give it a night. I saw this on Thursday night, opening night. Debated doing the double feature. I debated doing the double feature of Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3, but that is a lot of cinema in one night, and I didn't necessarily feel like sitting at the movie theater for up to 6 hours, basically, watching these two films back to back, because they are pretty lengthy films for what they are. So I decided I'm just going to watch Terrifier 3 on this initial watch. There are tons of double features of it coming up later on in the month and even next month, so maybe I'll check out the double feature eventually. But for this first night, I mean, I've had a little bit of a crazy week going on. I had jury duty the first few days of the week, came back to Cleveland, had to go to work. I just had like a really ridiculous week, so I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna go insanely hard, I'm not gonna kill myself, I'm just going to see the one film. Seeing both was just going to be way too much. Apologies for the phone going off. I always forget to mute the computer before I do these. So if a text comes through, my phone is obviously on silent, but everything through iMessage goes to the computer as well. So I apologize for the computer going off for a second. But regardless, had a wild week. So I just decided to see the one film, and I saw it with Midnight Miles. We saw it together for the first time, and it was a packed out theater. The theater was packed out, which is really good to see. When we saw Terrifier 2 in theaters, it was a packed out theater as well. But this particular room we were in, for this one was substantially larger than the one that we saw Terrifier 2 in. Also, Terrifier 2 only had like select screenings at the time, and then through word of mouth, they added more screenings and stuff like that. Like, this was an actual release. This was an actual opening night release, so it actually got a pretty big crowd, a pretty eclectic crowd, pretty diverse crowd. I saw all walks of life in there. There were, they were like older people there, a lot of young people, a lot of people around my age, a lot of kids who probably had their parents buy them tickets and then dipped out. Like, there were definitely some elementary school kids in there, like unattended by themselves. So various different crowds, various walks of life were there, all to see Art the Clown and all of his mayhem and misery that he brings apart throughout the course of this film. I'm going to keep this review relatively spoiler-free. I say relatively spoiler-free because there are certain things I need to get into to discuss my thoughts about it, but I'm not going to give away any big reveals, anything like that, but there might be certain elements of the plot that I'll break down a little bit, and I will do, at the end, I will talk spoilers at the end of this podcast. I will talk spoilers. I will talk where this, where I think the franchise is going to go from here, where I think it should go from here. But I will give a spoiler disclaimer, so if you haven't seen the film, you can end the podcast there and then move about with your day once we get into the spoiler territory. But first, as always, we will talk a little bit about the plot synopsis, the general story. What is Terrifier 3 about? Obviously, this picks up after the events of Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2. Prior to that, Art the Clown was in All Hallows Eve, and he was also in a couple... It was either one or two. He was in a couple short films prior to even being in All Hallows Eve. Hit the mainstream-ish with Terrifiers 1 and 2, and now with Terrifier 3, Art the Clown has been solidified as a icon of horror, as a staple of horror. You can't walk into a Spirit Halloween without seeing a life-size statue of Art the Clown that you can purchase for your home. Art the Clown has cemented himself as the next great horror icon. I can comfortably say that Art the Clown is going to be with us for years and years to come. Whether or not he's still featured in films, he is going to be a staple of pop culture from here on out in terms of horror. The last one we really had like that was Sam from 2007-ish. So it took a while for the next horror icon to really, really solidify himself within the eyes of horror fans and within the mainstream. And that's what I really mean. It was a packed out theater for a mainstream-ish film coming out in October. It wasn't a Fathom event. It wasn't a very limited release. This is a wide release. So Art the Clown is the next great horror icon. But let's talk a little bit about this film specifically, Terrifier 3. It is a Christmas horror film. It is a Christmas horror film. But let's refer to Letterboxd. Let's refer to the good old Letterboxd to give us what they say the description of the film is, and then I will obviously give my own thoughts and opinions about the film as well. You better not shout. You better not cry. 5 years after surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and Jonathan are still struggling to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind. But just when they think they're safe, Art returns, determined to turn their holiday cheer into a new nightmare. The festive season quickly unravels as Art unleashes his twisted brand of terror, proving that no holiday is safe. This might be the greatest Christmas horror film of all time. It might be. I mean, it's hard to say. Obviously, Black Christmas is a classic. You have your, Silent Nights, Deadly Nights. You have your rare exports. You have Gremlins. You have stuff like that. But this is certainly my highest rated Christmas horror film of all time. I mean, it might have the same score as Gremlins. But Gremlins, hit or miss on if it's actually horror. This is, without a doubt, a horror film. A great horror film, a horror comedy, a film that really blends the horror and comedy seamlessly. It has elements that are genuinely comedic, and it has genuine moments of terror. It has moments that are genuinely terrifying within the film. Just from the opening scene, it's a home invasion. That's a terrifying concept. Like, there are things in this film that are genuinely, realistically terrifying. There's nothing more terrifying than a clown dressed up in a Santa suit going and massacring a family while the child watches and the child thinks that it is Santa Claus. And I'm not considering that a spoiler. This is literally the pre-credits sequence. This film, and there's a lot of things to really get into about it. Again, I don't want to go into a scene-by-scene analysis or anything like that. Just from that opening, one of the best parts about it, and it really just added to the whole experience of it, as soon as the film opens up, you see the house outside, light snow falling, As soon as it went into the house, there was a beautifully decorated Christmas tree. And throughout the audience, you heard a collective cracking open of beer cans. I heard, it was like an echo. It was bellowing through the theater. Like, I audibly, like, laughed when it happened. Everyone cracking their beer simultaneously, because once you're in that house, it's not safe. It was just a great experience. Like, I've never had something like that where there's an audible beer cracking during a film. Again, in a packed out theater. Miles and I were actually sober when we were watching the film. There were a lot of people drinking beers. There was definitely the smell of some other recreational uses that were happening either prior to when they walked in or whatever. But I went in, I wanted to experience it just as it was. I wanted to experience it completely sober. I didn't even have like a pregame beer or anything like that. I wanted to watch it for what it was and judge it upon its own merits. Honestly, I haven't had this much fun in a theater in a very, very long time. This was one of the most fun experiences going to a theater in a long time because of this film. I think so far this year, and it took a lot to kind of take down my number one film of the year, but right now this is my number one film of the year. This is my highest rated film of the year. We'll see what the rest of the year has in store for me. Obviously, the Nosferatu remake is coming out this Christmas, so very excited for that as well. But as of right now, Terrifier 3 is my favorite film of the year, and I'm very, very high on the film. The Letterboxd ratings from my friends who have seen it are a little bit all over the place. My wife famously said that the film was mid. But she rated it 3.5. So in my mind, 3.5 is a great rating. Miles gave it the same rating as I did, which is 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's hard for me to give a film a 4. It's hard for me to give a film a 3.5, let alone a 4.5. Like, there was no way I was going all the way to 5. Like, 5 is reserved for very, very particular films, but 4.5 is about as good as a film can get for me on its first watch. 4.5 is a very, very high rating for me. I can't remember the last time I rated a new release 4.5. I think last year I may have rated Past Lives 4.5, but I think that was my only 4.5 or 5 out of the year last year. So I'll maybe rate a film 4.5, maybe once or twice every couple years. Like, it's very, very hard for me to give a 4.5 film. Talking a little bit more specifics of the story. Obviously, it takes place right after Terrifier 2. It takes place a few years later. These siblings are separated in a way. One of them has been Sienna. She's been in a mental institution, basically, trying to cope with everything that happened. She has visible scars on her face. And Jonathan, her brother, has sort of taken the opposite approach. Little Punk People is no longer punk. He's traded in the battle vest, the Metallica t-shirts. He's traded in everything for a basic JCPenney's sort of getup. He sort of had a total pivot within his personal life. He's now in college. He's probably a freshman in college. I mean, he still looks like he's like 10 years old in this. But he is in college. He's doing his best to try to get out there, make friends. In a way, I mean, obviously still very, very socially awkward and stuff like that. But they both have different ways of sort of coping with the events that had transpired. I like how they explain what art and mild spoiler alert, he escapes with the victim from the first film who we saw in the institution in the second film. They get out. Chris Jericho is there. He was in the last film as well. Chris Jericho is there, and they escape. And they start wreaking havoc throughout the town, and then they go dormant for a while. And I like how they explain how they go dormant. I like how they end up getting woken up again 5 years later. It's great. There's some genuinely haunting imagery during these segments. Genuinely haunting imagery. If you were to take a screen grab of the woman in the bathtub prior to the 5 year, Like, that screen grab is honestly like creepypasta material. That image is just genuinely horrifying, and it's also genuinely horrifying when they come back 5 years later to see them. I love Art's segment, where he's at as well. I just love it because it would be hard to sort of be like, well, what were they doing those 5 years? So this kind of like was a nice way to sort of explain the distance in time, because stuff like, because you would always get like stuff with Michael Myers, like, oh, what was he doing until next Halloween? So this is a good way to sort of bridge the gap between the two films. I thought it was funny. I thought it was spooky. Genuinely some great imagery in there as well. I love that. That might be my favorite. One of my favorite like still shots of the film is the woman in the bathtub. Prior to the 5 year. I think that's probably one of the most creepy shots that I've ever seen. In general, I just really like her look in this film as well. At a certain point, she does put on some face paint and stuff like that, and she looks very similar to Jeff the Killer, which I guess is another creepypasta sort of reference. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I really love her look in this film. I really love what they did with her in this film. I like that they were able to actually sort of make her a main-ish character within this. Obviously, she was the lead in the first film. In the second film, we saw glimpses of her, of what was going on in this. She is fully back in this film. I need to rewatch Terrifier 2 because I'm not sure what happened with Art's, partner in crime in that one, because she is not in this one. So I cannot remember if in Terrifier 2 she meets her demise, or if it really is heavily implied that this little girl that Art's hanging out with is a figment of his imagination or something from this sort of larger demon realm that we know Art comes from, and she's just back in the demon realm for this film, but it kind of doesn't really explain what happened to her. So I don't know if I am misremembering something from 2 and she actually... it's explained away in 2 why she's not there anymore. But she is not in this film, so I don't really remember what was going on with that. Because I was expecting her to be in it in some capacity, and she just wasn't in it. Some other things that I liked about the film, obviously, the gore. The gore in this film, it's hard to say if this is the goriest film that I've ever seen in my life. Because, again, I haven't rewatched 2 in a while, so 2 very well could be more gory than this, but it's definitely close. It's definitely close to the goriest film that I've ever seen. Dead Alive has some crazy gore in it, but I haven't seen that in a while either. But this definitely has some of the most violent, brutal, gory acts that I've seen, and that's what this series is known for. That's what this Terrifier series is known for. Obviously, the first film has the great cut in half kill. In Terrifier 2, one of Sienna's friends gets it worse than anybody I've ever really seen in a horror film. In this film, there's just nonstop violence. Obviously, I talked about the pre-credit sequence. There's a scene in a bar that's hilarious. There's a use of a gun in it. I love when there's a gun in a horror film. I just think it's hysterical. There's a particular scene that takes place in like a locker room shower scenario. That scene... I have not laughed that hard at any film, a comedy film, horror film, whatever, in a very, very long time. I was belly laughing. I was laughing my fucking ass off. I was audibly laughing. Even Miles was laughing at how much I was laughing about. I mean, he was laughing too, but I was laughing even for like a minute after the sequence was over. It was genuinely one of the funniest, most violent, ridiculous things that I've ever seen in my entire life. I won't give away what it is, but it was something. It was a treat. It made me very happy. My mouth hurt. Like the size of my mouth when I was smiling so much, it hurt after this segment of the film. So that's probably my favorite sequence within this film. In terms of because that's all about the gore. In terms of the story, I liked how sort of streamlined and more simple this story was. I mean, on paper, it's a very formulaic story. The siblings, they're having a little bit of turmoil. Sienna is seeing visions of what is going on. We don't know if the visions are true or if Art is really coming back. I mean, we know Art is really coming back, but the characters in the film do not. And it is a little bit cliche. It's a little bit of a cliche of a story. It's a little bit simpler of a story, but I wholeheartedly welcome that to this franchise. The first film, very, very simple. The second film, I think it went a little bit too hard with some of the mythological elements, with some of the lore. I like it all, but it's just, again, that is a 2.5 hour film with nothing you can really cut out contextually. Like this film, I like that they were able to tell a more simplified story and still hit all the points that you want from a Terrifier film. It still has quite a bit of lore building. It keeps a simpler framework to string you along through that lore. The second film is really, really out there. I do think that this third film is my favorite within the franchise. Just because you did get all of that lore building, all that deep stuff out with Terrifier 2, and this one was able to not fully go back to basics, but able to take the best parts from Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2 and put them together. So I really, really appreciate that for the film. Again, it is a Christmas horror film, so I like that it takes place on a different holiday. I can see this being a Christmas rewatch for me, if not every year, but every few years. You know how it is. It's hard to watch the same film every single year. But I could definitely see this being put into my Christmas rotation. I find it a little bit bizarre that they even released it this early. I mean, this released on October. Well, I mean, we saw it on the 10th. October 10th at night. It comes out today officially on the 11th. But I think that they're planning on having like a long theater run of this. I'm hoping that they are able to get this to last in theaters until the Christmas season. At least even if it's like a couple screenings or stuff like that, or maybe do a special release, do a director's cut. But I hope this stays in theaters until around Christmas time. I think that would be absolutely phenomenal. Like I can get, if they maybe released it the last weekend of October or something like that leading into November, but it's still very early on in October. So I hope it's able to sort of survive in theaters for a while. Like, as I said, like there are some places doing double features of it in early November that are confirmed, but I hope that like once we get closer to the Christmas season, like more theaters are still doing stuff around Terrifier 3. I hope they have someone like in Art the Clown makeup at the theater wearing a Santa outfit. That would be great. I would love it. I love some of the not so subtle references to other horror films within this. There's obviously, I mean, if you're watching the film, you're going to pick up on at least one of the references, but there are a few. I will leave some of them for you to find for yourself. But the very, very obvious one is there's callbacks to The Shining. If you love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, there's callbacks to that as well. There are so many things that the filmmakers put into this film that they love, and for me, that just makes me very happy. Like, I'm sure that they had a blast making this film. I'm sure that this was great for everyone involved. I mean, it just looks so fun. It looks so lighthearted. Like, even when they're doing incredibly fucked up and disturbing stuff, like, this is one of the most fucked up films I have ever seen, but you can tell that they're doing it all in good fun. And that's what I like about this series. I mean, Art the Clown is still a clown. Like, this is all funny to him. So I have a feeling that behind the scenes, like, the vibes are just immaculate. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously I wasn't there. But, like, I can tell that they're just having a blast making these films and coming up with these films and shooting these films. And it makes me envious. Like, I wish that I was doing stuff out there like this. But it's amazing. It's amazing to see this. I love this for the horror genre. I love this for film in general. I think the film is amazing. Like, it's hard for me to put into words like how great I think it is without breaking it down scene by scene. Maybe once it's out for a while, or maybe for a Christmas episode, I'll break it down more spoiler-y. But again, this is just very, very light spoilers. A couple things that disappointed me about the film, and we can talk about the light spoiler things, and then we'll get into spoiler territory. So light spoilers. As I said, Little Punk People is no longer punk. And I was waiting for a scene where he feels the need that he has to suit up and fight. I was waiting for a scene where he knows Art the Clown's coming after him. He needs to get to business. He needs to have like his Ash Williams moment where he's in the shed attaching the chainsaw saying groovy. I was waiting for a moment like that in this film with Jonathan, and we never got it. I was waiting for a moment like that with him where, you know, he is like, fuck, we need to get to business. You start hearing Square Hammer or something in the background. You start hearing Seek and Destroy in the background or something like that, or a Pantera song or something ridiculous. And he starts suiting up to fight Art the Clown. He whips out a battle vest. He throws on Doc Martens skinny jeans. I was waiting for like a badass moment, and he puts his glasses on or something like that and like spits a one-liner. I thought, like, since his character is so socially awkward, that would be a good way to sort of have a really, really comedic moment of him suiting up for battle, getting back to basics, getting back to who he is as a character. Not this Hollister, Abercrombie and Fitch wearing dude shopping at Baby Gap, but getting back to being who he is. He is Little Punk People. That is his internet persona. So I was waiting for a moment like that. That moment didn't come. And I definitely, obviously in this film, not getting into spoilers, there are a lot of people who die in this film. There are a lot of people who die in this film. There are people who are members of the not just disposable killers. There are not just disposable kills like random extras and stuff. There are people who are integral to the plot that are killed off in this. And there are some characters, especially one in particular, that I think deserved a better death sequence, an on-screen sequence of any kind. A major player in this film is killed off-screen. I understand why they did it, and it works within the context of the story that they're trying to tell. It's a big reveal that this character has passed on, but still, that's it. The character is gone, allegedly, and we never see it. But that gets me thinking if this character actually is dead. We don't really have a ton of definitive proof, but going off of what the film is telling us that this character is dead. And it kind of makes sense that this character would be dead, just given because not a lot of people have an interaction with Art the Clown and survive. But we don't even really see the interaction with Art the Clown either. So it's hearsay whether or not this character is actually dead. I have my own opinions about it, and once we get into the spoiler segment, which is coming up in just a minute, we will discuss my thoughts on this. So now this is your official spoiler warning. If you do not want the film spoiled for you, you can turn this off right now, keep track of where you are, and then come back after you watch the film. Again, it is opening day, so go and check it out in theaters. And for the rest of you guys who don't give a shit about spoilers, or for those of you who have already seen the film, I don't think that Jonathan is dead. I do not think that Jonathan is dead. Because all we see is a skull, and then he puts the glasses on it. Just because he has the glasses doesn't mean that Jonathan is dead. Jonathan could be captured. Jonathan could be out doing other things, but I do not believe that Jonathan is dead. I think that the sole purpose of this was to break Sienna. Was to totally break Sienna so that the demon in this film could possess her body. I think it was just a way to totally break her spirit, break who she is, and they would be able to get what they want. I do not think that... Because I think justice for Jonathan, I think that he deserved an on-screen onslaught death. If he was going to die, I think it deserved to be something insane. Because, again, he was a main character in the last two films. So I think he's still out there, whether Art has him in the demon realm or somehow it explains in Terrifier 4 that he escaped. I think he's still out there. I still think that there's a way to bring him back in a fourth film. But that's just me. I mean, he could be dead. We could take it from surface level. We could take it from what the film is telling us, and he could be dead. But I do not believe that he is dead. The biggest question that I have for this film, based upon the ending, is where do they go from here? Where do they go from here? I think that they are going to do the fourth film all in hell, all in the demon realm. I mean, obviously, you need to start it maybe outside of the demon realm, and then they travel there, and then the entire thing is batshit insane. Maybe the tables turn, and Sienna is this murderer of all these demons, and the tables are flipped, and she's going after Art. But there's no way that this entire film can take place in the human world. There's no way that this film can take place in the human world. I feel like they have to do like a Hellraiser 2 scenario where we are fully in Art's world. We're fully in where he comes from. We're fully immersed in that segment. Miles made a brief comment when we were leaving the theater that he feels like the next film is basically going to be Damien Leone's version of Army of Darkness. It's basically, this was his Evil Dead 2. Army of Darkness, they knew they had to pivot. I feel like Damien knows that he has to pivot into something else. So that's my assumption. It's all going to be in this demon realm, trying to get Gabby back. Maybe at the beginning of the film it's revealed that Jonathan was captured as well. Maybe it's both of them trying to go and get Gabby back. Maybe it is, I don't know. Like, I think the tables are going to turn. I hope that Art still is incredibly ruthless in the film, but I think the tables are going to turn. I think that maybe in Terrifier 4, we may be rooting for Art to get out alive. I think Sienna is going to have a dark turn, and maybe it's for the best. Maybe that's what Art wants. Maybe that's the reveal. Maybe that's the reveal that this demon really is going to take control of her. But I think she will have a change of heart in 4. I think she's going to be ruthless, but then I think at the end she's going to have a change of heart and still be a babyface. But I definitely think that Terrifier 4 is going to be a much, much different film, which is welcomed. I mean, obviously, it's the natural progression of events. There's no way that they can do another film like this or another film like Terrifier 2. I mean, you could, but it would just kind of be retreading the same thing. I mean, I would love to see it. I would love to see another gore-fest in the human world as long as it has like a good beginning, middle, and end. Like, I'm game for it, but I think that this series is going to take a more like grand turn with that. And I mean, honestly, I'm welcome to either. I think that the Demon Realm kind of story is much more interesting because, I mean, we've seen Art do insane feats in these films. So like I'm looking for something a little different. Again, if it's still the same, I'm still going to pay money for it. I'm still going to be obsessed with it. It's still going to be good. As long as it has a good story. I mean, it can't just be gore for the sense of gore and stupid shit, but like as long as it's entertaining, as long as it's good, I'm going to be all on board. But I'm hoping that they have another great lore-heavy story in the next one, but it's still more streamlined than 2. It's still able to be about 2 hours and not 2.5 hours. I love Terrifier 3. I loved Terrifier 3. Again, it's hard for me to give anything above a 4-star. I gave it 4.5. Again, my friends' Letterboxd scores are all over the place. Jared and Maisie have not seen the film yet. They're going to see it tomorrow. But I'm curious to know what you guys thought of the film. Obviously, this is the spoiler section. So if you have seen the film already, I would love to know what your thoughts are about it. Definitely leave me a comment. Get in touch with me via social media to let me know what you think of Terrifier 3. Again, I thought it was a blast. I don't really know what else to say about it without breaking it down scene by scene. Again, I would love to do that sometime. But for now, we're just going to be signing off, riding into the sunset. And I'll see you guys back here for another episode of the House of Horror next week on Monday. A fresh week. We're going to be reviewing a couple other new releases. I'm going to be doing a new, like sub-series, I want to do a little bit of a test episode. So next week's going to be an exciting week on the House of Horror as well, obviously. And I can't wait to see you guys there. So I will see you guys in the next episode. And here's the outro. Well, that is about it for my review of Terrifier 3, you guys. Did you love the film? Did you hate it? Either way, let me know. Get in touch with me. And again, if you haven't already, you got to make sure you're leaving me a 5-star review. Make sure you're subscribing over on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get the show. Make sure you're subscribing, leaving a rating, a review, thumbs up, leaving a comment, spreading the good word about Buddy's House of Horror. Tell your friends, family members, anyone who would like the show. Make sure you're telling them all about the show. And we will see you back here again for another episode of Buddy's House of Horror podcast, coming at you very, very soon. So take care and stay spooky.